Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce one more engaging speaker. The Member of Parliament for Parkdale High Park is a stalwart friend of Ukraine, always making himself available to the community and appearing frequently to convey strong messaging of commiseration and support. He holds the distinction of being Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Arif Virani. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Zenon. I'd say дуже дякую. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've been participating just in this tail end of the conference. How are you, Wayne? Didn't see you in the audience there. Seen some former parliamentarians, and I know you were greeted earlier by Chrystia, Minister Freeland, which is excellent. But it's a real honor to be here. So let me just say thank you to Zenon for the introduction. It's an honor to be here on behalf of the Government of Canada and on behalf of all of the Canadian businesses that are represented here. I see obviously the various sponsorships that are listed on the various material here. I'll isolate one of them, Faskins. That's my old law firm. Very proud that they are here sponsoring this event. In terms of just addressing the important issue, which is rebuilding Ukraine through trade and investment, which is so critical. But let me start by also obviously outlining the important leadership role that the Canadian Ukraine Chamber of Commerce has played in putting this together, the Business Council of Canada, the Embassy of Canada in Ukraine, the Embassy of Ukraine in Canada, and Ukraine's Ministry of the Economy. It's all very important aspects of putting together such an important conference. Hello, Aaron. I see many different parliamentarians gathered here in the room. It is really critical when we talk about sort of what we're doing with respect to rebuilding Ukraine to just understand sort of where we are. And you know this better than I do in terms of the situation we are in. Today is November 23rd. Tomorrow will literally be the ninth month anniversary of the conflict and Russia's illegal, barbaric, and unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine itself. What I have been struck by as a parliamentarian who represents thousands of Ukrainian Canadians, who has gotten to know a great deal about the Hromada, as Chrystia explains to me in her fine Ukrainian, is about the resilience of the community, not just the diaspora that is here in Canada, but the resilience of Ukrainians themselves. I think that video that we just saw is a testament to that. And I'm sure you've been hearing about that throughout today's proceedings. It is incredible the amount of perseverance, the amount of bravery, the amount of strength that has been shown and is continuing to being shown in terms of defending Ukraine's sovereignty and its territorial integrity. And what I'm here to outline is, I'm sure you heard this earlier today, but it's this idea about what we are doing as a government. And I'll say to you quite clearly that it is not a particular political party initiative. It is really a broad parliamentary initiative where we find commonality amongst every political stripe in a very nonpartisan manner in terms of stepping up to support Ukraine, not just for what it means for Canada, but what it really means for democracy and free market economies around the planet. And that's really quite critical to underscore. It's something that I'm here on behalf of Mary Ng. She is the Minister of International Trade, Economic Development, Export Promotion, and Small Business. It's quite a long title. We tend to reduce it, as Zenon did, to just international trade. It's a bit easier to sort of to get out in that manner. But what she's been working on is particularly with her counterpart, Yulia Sviridenko in Ukraine, the Minister of Economy in Ukraine, is about how we can bolster those ties. And when I talk about this nonpartisan approach, you may or may not know, I don't need to necessarily identify the party, but there's the odd party that's not so promoting of free trade agreements around the planet. Aaron knows exactly what I'm talking about, so does Wayne. But even that party stood up when we were having debates about the Canada-Ukraine free trade agreement and stepped forward, and it was a unanimous vote in Parliament to support Canada-Ukraine free trade because people appreciate what it means in terms of the resilience, the survival of the economy, but also the rebuilding of the economy as we come out of what is hopefully the end of the conflict soon. And in terms of what we've been doing, I was struck by the discussions about drones, because I remember in the very early days discussions with Minister Anita Anand, another one of my colleagues, about what we were doing specifically to support Ukraine militarily. And this is not part of my speaking notes, so the officials will excuse me here. But on the piece about weapons, there's a lot of discussion earlier on about lethal weapons, and we delivered lethal weapons, which is important. But there was active discussion about drones and technological warfare and what Canada could do to assist in terms of actually providing drones and also repairing drones that are being damaged in active conflict zones. But I think it's interesting bridging that discussion, which was happening in sort of February and March, to the discussion that the Ukrainian startups are having about ensuring that the technological know-how and the ability and knowledge is there on the ground in Kiev and other locations in Ukraine to do this on a homegrown basis. And that's really, really critical. And I'll segue to another piece that I think is important for you to understand. When we talk about what we're doing to collaborate with Ukraine, it cuts across a number of different fronts. There's one that I was directly involved in, which is called MyTax. And you don't need to know about the MyTax program, but there might be some in this room that do. But the MyTax program takes students from around the planet, but it targets about, right now, I think about 11 or 12 different countries, and it brings them here to learn the technological know-how to do the exact type of innovation that our previous speaker was just talking about. We added Ukraine and Ukrainian students to the list of MyTax eligible students from around the planet around 2017. And I underscore that to say to you that the commitment of our government, the commitment of Canada's Parliament to Ukraine is strong. It was strong prior to the invasion, and it is only accentuated as a result of the invasion. But what you know is that what we have done in terms of since February 24th is we've taken steps with our NATO allies to work with the EU and G7 partners and the broader international community to support Ukraine. We've worked on sanctions that number over 1,000 at this point in terms of Russian oligarchs, people including relatives and people that are close to Putin and those that are in power. We've talked about, we've implemented the removal of most favored nation tariff status from Russia and from Belarus. And if you'll permit me a small digression again, we just had Svetlana, I'll mess up her last name, but the leader of the democratic movement in Belarus in Ottawa just yesterday and over the past 2 days, and I had a chance to meet with her. And supporting that kind of sentiment on the border, the northern border of Ukraine, is, I think, equally important and something we need to be focused in on, because it is part of shoring up the support that Canada and other democratic allies show towards Ukraine in terms of all of the threats that that surround Ukraine right now. And we know the Lukashenko regime is equally a threat. But our support of Ukraine is quite deep. It's a whole of Canada approach, but it also has seen Canadians, and I'm very proud of this in terms of my own constituents, stepping up from all walks of life to assist Ukrainians themselves, taking in people that are fleeing the persecution and fleeing the violence in Ukraine into their homes in Bloor Street West in my riding, and literally run right around this country, donating to organizations, including the Red Cross and things like the Ukrainian National Federation. It is about something that I believe Christia may have mentioned to you this morning about the Ukraine Sovereignty Bond. This is a big step for the government of Canada. It's not one that we often take. What we are doing through the Ukraine Sovereignty Bond that I believe Minister Freeland outlined for you is we are empowering everyday Canadians of all walks of life, be they Ukrainian diaspora Canadians or not, to participate in the economic rebuild of Ukraine itself by investing and putting their dollars where their commitment lies. And that's really, really important. The opening of that actually launched on Monday. And the funds of those bonds will assist the government of Ukraine itself. So this is something that we've had dialogue with President Zelensky about in terms of how we can assist Ukraine. And it will provide essential services to Ukrainians this winter, such as pensions, the purchasing of fuel, and restoring energy infrastructure. It's clear that Canada continues to stand in solidarity with Ukraine during this difficult time. I and members of the Canada-Ukraine Parliamentary Friendship Group stand in solidarity. I believe Yvonne Baker, the chair of that group, was here earlier with us today. It's also clear that we do so because we value the ties between our country. I was just with some colleagues of mine who I've known for 20 to 30 years, and they were asking me about the Ukrainian diaspora in my riding of Parkdale High Park. What I educated them is about the 1.4 million that are around the country, but also how long the community has been in Canada. The ties literally stem for almost 130 years. That's quite an astounding statement, but it's also quite an astounding aspect of the community itself in terms of how deeply entrenched it is in Canada, but also how supportive it is in terms of what's going on in the home country, in Ukraine itself, but also what it lends in terms of our analysis and ability to understand and appreciate these issues. I often joke with people, whether it's Paul Grod or the current president of the VUCC, Alexander Hichi, about how I feel like almost like an adoptive son of Ukraine. And that extends to me being welcomed by people like Roman Voschuk, who was on the previous panel as I saw him on the screen. When he was the ambassador to Ukraine, he toured me around the Maidan when I was there on behalf of the Minister of Defense to understand what Canadian troops were doing through Operation Unifier to support Ukraine's defense efforts. But all of those efforts and all of that understanding stems from the Armada that is here in this room, the people that are in Canada that are educating parliamentarians, myself, about what Ukraine needs, but also about the importance of Canada and its ties to Ukraine. And I want to end on something that relates to sort of the trade and investment piece, wearing my Parliamentary Secretary for International Trade hat. You know that what we are doing is we have a Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. I mentioned that to you earlier, how that gathered all-party support. You know that we took steps, I hope you know that we were taking steps to modernize that agreement. That started around this time last year. And obviously, the invasion occurs February 24th. We, out of respect, thought we should put these things on hold. But to Ukraine's, to their credit, and quite astoundingly for both our political officials and our departmental officials, the Ukrainians themselves said, no, we want to continue with these talks. We need to move on this because the need for this expanded agreement to branch out to even more areas, more industries, to cover more services, is more acute than ever as a result of this invasion. So we took our cues from Ukraine. We want this to be Ukrainian-led, and we've been working diligently with them, and we're now on the precipice of actually finalizing a second iteration, a 2.0 version of this agreement. That's very important for the people in this room, the people that are gathered online, in terms of what we're doing as a government to ensure that the economic needs of Ukraine are being met now, in terms of finishing off the conflict with Russia, but secondly, in terms of the rebuild, the reconstruction that President Zelensky has been talking so much about. And that's about the economic recovery, it's about economic resilience, it's about transitioning to secure and stable sources of energy. The list is quite long. But the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement is a key part of that, and that's what Minister Ng has been working on with Minister Zveredenko. There's been terrific progress. I think what's important, based on what we heard from the startup group, is also the digital trade component that relates to that agreement. So we're looking forward to finalizing those negotiations in the coming months. We're confident we're going to have a high standard agreement that'll be another clear demonstration of the partnership between our two countries on economic and trade linkages. What I can say to you, to all of you in this room, to all of you who are following online, is know that our determination to support Ukraine is as strong as it has ever been. That is thanks to the leadership of the Prime Minister, thanks to the leadership of the Deputy Prime Minister, thanks to the leadership of so many Ukrainian Canadians who have educated parliamentarians like me about the vital link in supporting Ukraine for Canada's economic self-interest, for Ukraine's economic self-interest, but also for the interest of democratic governments around the world who believe in free market economic policies. We know that the potential is there, and we are keen to participate in that potential. The last thing I've been asked to do by those who prepared my remarks is just emphasize Canada's trade toolkit to all of you. I think you heard from EDC just about 45 minutes ago, but there are a tremendous amount of levers that you can access within the Government of Canada. I really encourage you to get to know a bit more about Canada's trade toolkit. It includes EDC, it includes Global Affairs Canada, it includes the Trade Commissioner Service. Our trade commissioners are an entity that I think are really are well utilized by those who are in the know, but really people need to know a bit more about them. There are more trade commissioner offices around the planet than there are diplomatic missions for the Government of Canada. And they operate in places including like our embassy in Kyiv, and they can facilitate introductions between Canadian and Ukrainian firms, and they're there to open up economic doorways and economic opportunities. So whatever your angle is with respect to this conference, whether it's the digital space, whether it is commodities, whether it is the different sort of business-to-business linkages you're seeking to exploit, please use the Government of Canada services to do so, because know that we believe strongly in not just Ukraine winning this important fight, but Ukraine coming out of this stronger than ever. That will take time, but Canada is determined to be a strong partner to make it happen. Thank you. Дуже дякую. Слава Україні.
Thank you very much, Member of Parliament Virani. As a constituent of yours who lives in Bloor West, I can say that I see you at more Ukrainian events than I see some Ukrainians. So, ladies and gentlemen, we made it. We're coming to the closing remarks. While it is sad that we won't be able to gaze out and see your faces, it'll be nice to see you at the cocktail hour. And on that note, I invite Mr. Zenon Potichny, President of the Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce, to come and present us with these closing remarks.
John, thank you very much, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing my name, but you will definitely pronounce it better next time. So there's some positive stuff out of that. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, it is now my great pleasure to give closing remarks to what I believe has been both an informative and an inspiring day. Thank you. The number of important people who deserve thanks, and there are few pages, so please be patient. You don't put a big business forum like this without a lot of people and partners involved. Sincere thanks to governments of Canada and Ukraine. Their unwavering support made today possible. In particular, embassy staff from both sides have worked tirelessly to see this conference succeed. I would like to briefly mention an ongoing project of CUCC in conjunction with the Embassy of Canada in Ukraine called You Can Bid, which is based on the Prozoro platform. You Can Bid is a portal to provide Canadian businesses support to participate in multi-million-dollar tenders in Ukraine. Currently being redeveloped and improved, it will be a mechanism for tender participation with comprehensive government support. I would also like to thank our partners. Business Council of Canada, CO Club of Ukraine, Embassy of Ukraine in Canada, Embassy of Canada in Ukraine, Global Affairs Canada, Ministry of Economic Development of Ukraine, and Ministry of Digitization of Ukraine. As with any conference, it would not have been possible without the support of our sponsors. And I wish to thank the whole group. But I want to make one comment. I'm not sure if Yulia Kovalyu, Ukrainian ambassador, is still here or not, or maybe in the other room. But she was the one that told us when we told her Mississauga or Oakville maybe, and she said, no, Ukraine is #1 and it has to be downtown Toronto. So unfortunately, we could not say no, and we moved it all here. And as you can see, this is a top place in Toronto. It is about 20 grand more than Mississauga or Oakville. When I asked the ambassador, Miss Ambassador, does the embassy have the 20 grand to pay the difference? No, embassy has no money. But I am joking. She did definitely brought us some additional sponsors, and we thank you for that, Pani Ambassador. All right, so here is the list of sponsors: Fasken Law Firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the Timbertay Foundation, Horizon Capital, Ukrainian Credit Union Limited, BCU Credit Union, Fairfax, Northland Power, CIBC, GDLS Canada, Maritime Launch, Black Iron, Mies Corporation, TIU, Rochelle, Multiplex, Desjardins, Ukrainian World Congress, Canada-Ukraine Foundation. Isn't it great to have a list like that of sponsors? Please give them a big hand of applause. I would also like to give thanks to our CUCC staff and board members for their incredible efforts. In particular, Olya Mandyuk. And Olya, make sure you sleep for the next 2 days. Don't do anything else, just sleep, please. Victoria Uman, Markian Vitvitsky, Markian Markevich, Yuri Krivosheya, as well as Emma Turos and Alla Turos in our Kyiv office. Appreciation to Megan Medal and her team at Curated by M for masterful execution of today's event. Many thanks to Johnny Moskalik, and I always tell him he's lucky his name is not Moskal, but Moskalik, for moderating today's business conference. A final welcome and thank you to our members, supporters, volunteers, and guests. You have all played a role in making today possible. In closing, hopefully you leave today's Rebuild Ukraine Business Conference with a broadened horizons, greater market knowledge, and new contacts to develop future opportunities. Glory to Ukraine, Slava Ukraini. Thank you, дякую.